AM 630, Washington's Mall, WMAL.
Now, Washington mornings on the Mall.
105.9 FM.
And AM 630.
WMAL.
Good morning. Good Tuesday to you. 7:07 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. This is the 11th anniversary of 9/11. And by the way, we're going to have Dr. Waleed Phares on the show about an hour from now. Pleased to be joined now by Ambassador John Bolton, former UN ambassador and foreign policy advisor to the Romney campaign. Ambassador Bolton, good to talk to you again.
Well, glad to be with you.
All right, since 11 years since 9/11, and I'm probably going to forget some things, but we've been in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, you've done some things in Yemen, Libya, perhaps soon to be in Syria, maybe Iran. Saddam Hussein is dead, Gaddafi is dead, bin Laden is dead, Mubarak is gone, the Arab Spring happened, we have the Muslim Brotherhood on the rise, new tensions with Israel, the fear of Iran. And these 11 years, are we on the right path today, where we need to be?
No, I don't think so. I think American national security has weakened measurably in the past several years. I think that the threat from international terrorism and the proliferation of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons continues to increase. And the notion that because Osama bin Laden has finally been hunted down and killed, that basically, the war on terror is over, that narrative is just flatly wrong. Let's just take an example right in the news now. The report that a drone strike in Yemen has killed one of the top al-Qaeda officials there. This is being used by the Obama folks as another example of their successful policy. Let's not forget, that guy was in Guantanamo Bay for 6 years until he was released in the Bush administration to the Saudis for a rehabilitation program. Now, why was Bush releasing people like that? Because people in the Republican Party, Bob Gates, the Secretary of Defense, Condi Rice, the Secretary of State, and people in Congress were saying, oh, Gitmo's such a terrible thing, it's a recruiting tool for al-Qaeda. Great, release these people, and they turn out to be al-Qaeda operatives yet again. So I'm glad the drone hit its target, but we wasted a lot of money. We could have kept that guy in Gitmo.
But what is the plan moving forward? I mean, more of these strikes?
I don't think we have a plan moving forward. That's part of the problem. The idea that drone strikes in Yemen and Afghanistan somehow are going to solve the terrorism problem, I think, is delusional. It harkens back, to the late 1990s when President Clinton's favorite weapon of choice was the Tomahawk cruise missile. So you think you've got bin Laden sighted in Afghanistan, you fire off a couple of Tomahawks. You think there's a chemical weapons plant in the Sudan, you fire off a couple Tomahawks. It sounds good, but it's not solving the underlying problem.
Well, then how do you solve the underlying problem? Because I don't really think the American people want another land war anywhere.
Well, I think if they don't want terrorism in the streets of America, they have to be prepared for a sustained presence overseas. We don't want this war. This war wants us. This is what the terrorists want to do. Now, do you want to provide for our defense, or you just want to wait and see what happens again? It's not something that we desire, but it's something we face, and we either face up to it or we bear the consequences.
And I agree with you 100%. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the situation right now with the Russians and the Chinese. We see a very much more aggressive stance from the Russians. There's something going on in China right now. Nobody seems to really know what's happening there. I mean, the guy who's supposed to be the next president of China seems to be MIA at the moment.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting story. I think it's worth following. Obviously, we don't know the facts, but you point to real problems in new assertive Russia. You've got Vladimir Putin as president again, who once about 5 or 6 years ago said the breakup of the Soviet Union was the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. Whereas most of us think it was a pretty good way to end the 20th century. You've got China building a blue water navy for the first time in 5 or 6 centuries, making really outlandish territorial claims in the waters near China. I've got a piece in the Wall Street Journal today that dissects that. And what is our strategy? Our strategy under the Obama administration is basically pay no attention to it. Let's talk about taxing the rich. And forget about where our military and intelligence capabilities overseas stand.
And if we don't take that seriously, what happens?
Well, inevitably, our adversaries look at this lack of attention, declining military budgets, especially if the sequestration kicks in, and they see weakness. And what they act on is the perception of weakness. It's our weakness that leads them to believe they can challenge us. Contrary to the Obama view, it's not American strength that's provocative, it's American weakness that's provocative.
There was an article on Fox. They have talked to a medical doctor who helped us find bin Laden's compound, and he says that he was tortured at the hands of Pakistan's version of the CIA, their intelligence agency. And he says that their agency, who we work with on a regular basis, is hostile to the U.S. In his words, the spy agency regards America as its worst enemy. How can you deal? How can we have a relationship with Pakistan? How can we continue to do this if this doctor is accurate in his portrayal?
I think he is accurate. I think ISI, the Pakistani Intelligence Service, has long been a hotbed of Islamic radicalism. They created the Taliban. They have funded the Haqqani network. They sheltered Osama bin Laden. But they do not represent all of Pakistan. There are elements of the military that are friendly to us. There are elements of the civilian authorities that are friendly to us. But let's face it, we're in a race. We're in a desperate struggle in Pakistan to make sure that the radicals don't gain complete control, because if they do, then they'll have Pakistan's arsenal of nuclear weapons, and we'll have what we fear about Iran, we'll have it on steroids right now. I know people are frustrated with Pakistan. I've dealt with them for 30 years. It's been 30 years of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
But if you simply give in to the understandable feeling that we ought to throw them under the bus, you're going to throw them under the bus with nuclear weapons. That's a huge mistake.
So the Obama campaign said of the Romney campaign that Romney and Ryan are new to foreign policy. You're an advisor to the Romney campaign. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think Governor Romney is new to foreign policy. I think he's had a lot of international experience. And, you know, he's got something that Obama and Biden both lack, and that's good judgment. He's got a feeling about America's place in the world. He understands that a strong America internationally is critical for sustained domestic prosperity here at home. And, you know, the notion that the Obama administration somehow is a foreign policy success just is scary to me, because avoiding discussing or considering these problems we face overseas doesn't make them go away. You can focus on the domestic economy like Obama's done all you want. Our adversaries are not going to be gracious enough for us to get our economic house in order. They're moving on what they see as perceived weakness now. And I think if Obama were to win a second term, you'd simply see an acceleration in the pace and the scope of the challenges that we face worldwide.
Ambassador John Bolton, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.